finally come out.
Right.
And obviously it came out in rank, but it was seen by previous external reviewer.
I don't think it was seen in its published form.
Okay.
I don't think you're obligated to, and I'm not even sure you're obligated to explain that, because the date wouldn't create any confusion, right? The publication date is so far from your tenure date that I don't think there's any question. We're really talking about being careful about the stuff that came out the very year you submitted your dossier. When you get 2 years out to the actual publication date, even if it was really accepted but impressed the whole time, it's so far on your CV away from that promotion that I don't think that committees are going to split hairs there.
Another question is, when we say working rank, does it matter which time point it comes out? Does any work expire, say, in 5 years?
No.
So anything that can,
In rank.
so however long your rank is, it all count.
Yeah, and this is a really important question because people have different career trajectories. Sometimes it has to do with family obligations, with personal lives, with sabbatical plans, with commitments to service, with changes in institutions. You don't need to explain how long you've been in rank. You're judged on the work you've produced in rank. Some people can produce the amount needed for that clear step beyond tenure in a very few number of years. Some people, it takes longer. When we have our workshop, our formal workshop, we often have Rebecca Spang come and speak, and she talks about slow scholarship. And I'm gonna get the years wrong, there's a good gap between her 2 books, both of which are so well received that she's all over the news and she travels all over talking about these books when it comes out. There's a good chunk of time between. She needs a book in rank, and it takes her a little longer to get there, but she's very happy with the product. It's perfectly legitimate, and that's the nice thing. Tenure's on a time frame, promotion's not, and you don't get punished for taking your time, particularly if it took a while to sort of retool what you were working on and rebuild and get that distance, because sometimes you can get through your dissertation and just hang on for dear life through those 5 years, keep doing what you're doing, and then you realize, I really need to do something a little bit different. These questions I've been hoping to pursue, but didn't have time to before. So that's what you're supposed to be doing. It's not a liability. It should be viewed positively.
Well, so in that regard, I think it might be helpful for the group to hear how to buffer against being punished for a slow scholarship, because having been in those committees, I have seen some people who I think in their own way are trying to, I don't want to say punish, but are trying to. So, for example, what I've seen, I'm in public health, and so there are, a lot of us are very productive with numbers of publications, and what I've seen is some people point out maybe somebody who's taken a longer road to promotion, but then they'll do like an average publications per year count for them. So the committee member will do this to, really to kind of, I think, you make it look like it's low, so that happens though. And so this person may have done great work, but it just may have been a different trajectory for all these great reasons that you talked about, family, sabbatical, service. So in terms of being proactive to buffer against people who might be critical of the slow road, what advice would you have for the group?
Yeah, that's a good, you can't stop people from behaving badly, and it's unfortunate. And there should be someone with policy in mind on each of those committees, but it doesn't mean that committee members don't say things that they shouldn't and they don't evaluate it. And so you're right, I think taking a proactive step, but in my mind, the best proactive step goes right back to the criteria. I'm required to do this for promotion, and it focuses on excellence. It hardly ever says quantity. We actually laugh. I think my department has a goodly number of, which probably took 3 meetings and a few arguments to agree upon. But we agree that you need a goodly number of refereed publications. And that number is finite. And it's not an average per year. So I think if you say, I've achieved excellence, my scholarship is recognized in these ways, and you focus on metrics of quality rather than quantity, then that can be very helpful. You identify in your field what the measures are. And the rest of it is just knowing that you're right. Some some people don't care what the policy says. But at the end of the day, I've never seen a case where someone who was using inappropriate criteria won the day.
Right.
So I think that's the other thing to know. If there are people who believe there's only one path to promotion, they hardly ever represent a large quantity of people, and at every step of the way, you get a new, fresh look. You get a committee vote, you get an individual person who then looks at the committee recommendation. So I've never seen sort of those outliers do anything more than get to represent their voice as an outlier somewhere along the way. So you should also know that there is a level of fairness and a level of new consideration at every layer. And you can take heart in that, even if getting out of your own unit is sort of mired in the three people who went before you, and doesn't have much to do with the current state of the policy or anything else. Martha?
You can add a couple of things to that. I think it is worth working with your chair early on to make sure that the rules are clear. And I saw a lot of really badly written promotion statements, or at least heard tell of them. I didn't read the 16 pages of tenure followed by one paragraph of promotion. Actually, my department has a really nice, believe it or not, chemistry is not known as being a great actor, but we have a really nice promotion policy that's just being revised. So when we get it revised, I'll send it around to people. Yeah. But two things that occurred to me while you were talking. One is this idea of reaching out in new areas. You said you decide you have to. I would rephrase. You realize you now have the freedom to.
Yes, yeah, that's the point. Right?
If you are in a field that requires resources, like I am, evaluate that risk carefully. Mm-hmm. If you're not, the biggest downside is time. Right. Or if the field moves past you in some way because it's taking you longer. So those are, it's such a liberating thing to be able to say, I've done this, and now I can do what I really wanted. And I did that, and it worked out for me only to a certain extent. But I'm still happy I did it, because it was great while it lasted. So that, and the other part about making sure there is somebody in your department. I don't know if you have an advisory committee or a committee that does this sort of stuff, but it is worth making sure somehow, if you have an ally there, that they understand the rules and can talk about the rules. And my experience in my department is exactly what Kim's describing. Again, I'm not in a department that has a reputation for being nice about such things. Somebody always says, well, do we really want to do this? And then somebody else always says, the rules are thus and such, we can't consider this. So it helps. And the rules now, too, are also, people are starting to pay more attention to this, is that you're not allowed to vote. You're not supposed to vote no if you haven't made your objection clear. And that makes a big difference. If you're on a higher committee and you read a letter that says the vote was 16-4 and I have no idea where those 4 votes came from, the chair's letter says that, it gets ignored.
Same with abstentions.
More so. There was at least a while ago a policy that said if you abstain, you have to explain it. And if you vote no, you don't. But abstentions, and I'm on video and I'm going to get this wrong. The problem with abstentions is they were being reported in 2 different ways. So an abstention is different from an absence. Mm-hmm. An abstention should be a person who came to the meeting and did not cast a vote or participated in the voting in some way and did not say yes or no, as opposed to someone who legitimately was not present for whatever reasons.
Or was a spouse or something couldn't be there.
Or had a conflict, or was on a higher level committee. So the chair will explain who was gone and why, but the abstention is supposed to also be explained. And if someone just chooses not to vote, it's quite like voting no and not explaining it. The committees at the higher levels just say, who knows? They're not supposed to be unfamiliar with the case, but once in a while you'll get someone who attends the meeting and then says, I don't know this field well enough, and they won't cast a vote at all. That usually will show up in the chair's letter, but but those kinds of things come through. But that's usually, the committee usually says, and then they give a fresh look. And the committee really does read everything and look again, and so it's a fresh and it's a fair look at every stage. And you brought up a good point, because I'm talking about, getting to tenure on empty and having to retool, which is not necessarily the glass half full perspective, but just as you might have to take time to retool. Sometimes it's necessary to get the next round of funding, right? Because things have changed in the time that you were spending your last grant dollars to get tenure. So it can come from a really good place of looking to explore. It might come from some self-reflection saying, well, this is really making an impact, but in the last 2 years, these new tools have come out. If I don't learn to do it this way, then by the time I go up for promotion, it's gonna look like I haven't kept up with the field, even if you're producing. So there is a little bit of a tension, I think, between rate of production and keeping up with the field, pausing for a little while to get some new content. I think that's always part of, and it should be part of your narrative too. You know, how did you manage to do both when you're on the winning end of all of those decisions?
What kinds of professorships are available beyond the basic? So I feel like in my department, suddenly someone who got full professorship was also called Ruth N. Hall's whatever.
There
How do
are
these work?
money.
Their money, yes.
Yeah, and it
Show us the
depends-
money.
Well, it depends on who gave the money to whom. So there are some that are prizes where you're nominated and you go in. So provost professorship, please consider. It's for full professors and you can be nominated. There's letters of support, there's a selection committee, and that's an award that's given by my office. There are university-wide ones, there are school-wide ones, and then there are retention ones that can be given by the dean when you need to say, I really don't want you to go to that other institution.
But in general,
And then there are donors who may give specifically to a department or a field.
yeah.
So then they're named after the donor. So in this case, it's named after the donor, and I think the purpose of those is actually retention most of the time. It's people they didn't want to go away, and so it gives them a way to recognize the importance of that scholar.
But in general, are these, so I'm just kind of comparing to the, and I know we have someone in here who even has this, the junior distinguished, is there something
The
called
Outstanding Junior Faculty Award?
So that,
No,
if
the
I remember,
distinguished scholar, the junior distinguished scholar is usually
Oh.
an
something
associate, an associate professor distinguished scholar. Like there are a couple of named associate professor.
no, I think you are,
I know what you
don't
mean
have
about the
something like that?
junior one.
Yes.
Yeah, standing junior award is for assistant professor.
OJFA is for, yeah, it's,
So in that case, I'm just saying that, so in that case, what I understand is that, that's something that chairs decide?
no, the chair nominates the candidate, it comes to my
No, the
office.
chairs nominate.
And then there's a selection committee, and they read through these 70-plus dossiers and
Yes.
select 5 or 6 every year.
Yeah, no, great. But so, but you see it, my fear, right, is just that, does all this happen based on chair nomination? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, because I feel
like I'm gonna go down this road with you.
All right now.
because, you know, some years
It
maybe I have a
does.
chair with sense, and some years maybe I'm gonna have a chair that doesn't even know I exist. I don't know.
The Ruth N. Halls is you and the dean negotiating it. The provost
Ruth and Hall's
professorship.
okay.
Meaning
You have an offer,
Yeah.
and you say.
You did it all on your own.
Okay.
Sometimes the individual donors are separate decisions depending on where the money went. And then there are some that are awards. Most of those are chair nominations.
Thinking about you.
However,
Oh.
one thing that I would like to see people doing is recognizing either a chair who has a pattern of not nominating anyone
Yeah.
or nominating the same people over and over.
Hmm.
Because I think there are several of us who probably just were sitting around waiting to be nominated for things. And so, you know, and this is actually, we've had a little bit of tension in my own unit because there seem to be some stereotypical things playing out in the field of nominations. It's definitely someplace where we, I think, can, as faculty, actively request that we be nominated. And I also think in most of the cases, a non-chair but other full professor nomination would be happily received by most of these selection committees. It's just, it's not written that way, so it doesn't occur to us.
So I think some people are talking to their chairs, right, and saying, hey, nominate me, man.
My
So-
guideline is that all nominations are self-nomination.
Okay.
You need to be talking to the people who might nominate.
Right, right.
And you need to not stop if your chair says, no, I'm nominating so-and-so, which is what I completely agree with you. It's not only a self-nomination, but if it's not in paper a self-nomination and the first person you go to doesn't like the offer, go to the next person. Yeah.
So something that might be interesting to circulate among people in this group would be, what are the kinds of things that we should look into asking our chairs to nominate us for, potentially?
Please go to the
Should we be
VCFAA
so-
website.
Okay.
Actually, the provost professorship is for full professors.
That's like
So
once
you have to
you've
get
been
promoted
around.
first.
Yeah.
So are there ones for associate professors that are important for promotion?
Not that I know of.
No.
No, and quite honestly, some of the named chairships, it just looks like someone wanted to keep you. It doesn't necessarily, so if you have a provost professorship, people understand that to be a particular award, which is maybe more prestigious than financially advantageous if you're surveying offers. But I think a lot of those just mean someone wanted to keep you. And that's fine, but that's not the cornerstone of any case. And probably there are other types of recognition that matter a lot more. Recognition in your field, recognition for teaching it.
Is it true that some of them have a salary bump, but some of them have research funding associated with it? Like either or both, or how does it work?
All of the above.
Mhm.
And it can be a percentage, it can be a lump sum, it can be secret, it can be individually negotiated depending on them. Yeah, they're all over the map and everything's fair.
Can I ask a different
Yeah.
So for department and school criteria, for people who are joint appointments, but they have a tenure home in one school,
Yeah.
what do you do with the other school?
Right.
Do you upload their criteria? Do you?
So, yeah, this is an excellent question, and we've seen some really interesting cases recently. Sometimes there's an MOU and sometimes there's not. If there's an MOU, it usually spells out which criteria apply and then how the other unit will participate. In the absence of this, you may be working toward both criteria. Most of the time, there's not a conflict between the two criteria, but what gets tricky is the procedure. So, you're smiling because we just had one of these. In this case, the question wasn't about the criteria at all. It was about the procedure for the voting. Who voted and when and how they participated, in what way, on what level of decision. And those things, if you do not have them spelled out and we are a good distance from promotion, come talk to us. Because we can put something in writing in the form of an MOU that just spells out what will happen. In most of the ones I've seen, it specifically says, this is the tenure or the promotion home, these are the criteria that apply, and then you build out from there. Or it might say 50-50, but usually there's an
Yeah.
identified home, and then those are the, I've never seen a problem with the criteria, it's always the procedure, it's the voting and who participates how, and
Okay.
it's a good question.
I'd like to ask about the committee. So for promotion, then the promotion committee, would that be all presumably on the professor rank in your, and then within the department, then if there are not enough people who are that professor rank that's affiliated with that has the familiarity of your field, what do we do about it?
That's another excellent question. We do a lot of either MOU or informal agreements, putting together a committee to make sure that the candidate and the chair both agree that this is both consistent with the departmental policy as well as logical for the area of research. It's really common in small units to have a policy that says a subcommittee of the full professors will prepare a report, present it to the chair, and they will all vote, and then in reality that's two people. So then what ends up happening is we usually have a conversation about building a subcommittee that can participate, and we'll also spell out whether or not those people vote. Sometimes there's a subcommittee of experts in an allied field, and they will help assess the work and prepare a report, but then that report goes to the department and only the full professors in the department vote. The opposite can be true. So essentially we start with the unit criteria and we work out from there, and it's a little bit different in every case. But I would say if there is a very small number, so say the chair is one of those full professors, leaving you one or two other people, we almost always talk and build out a committee that can actually have a slightly broader view.
Yeah, because in my department, for example, there's only 3 full professors right now.
And one will be the chair and
Possibly,
Yeah.
and you also need, so you, in addition to the full professors, you need a committee
yeah.
that would work more closely with you, that would be your case and present it to the rest of the
Right.
full professors, right?
And there are people
So-
in different disciplines
Yeah.
also.
Right.
So, yeah, it's, especially if you're a linguist, it's really common to pull in someone from
a
another department
department.
who's a full professor, who can help evaluate the work. And then the level of participation also depends on the unit's policies and their wishes.
When do we get to have a say on that, or write down something so that we know what it's gonna be like, what we are aiming for?
You know, I think you could have the conversation at any time. The actual official constituting of the committee would be on the timeline of that pre-promotional review for most people. So I think the starting point is to look at the timing for those types of reviews and see how many bodies are required. And then logically, if you aren't going to have more people than that, at any point in time, you can start already the conversations about pulling people in, maybe without names attached early on. You could agree that there would be 2 other full professors in allied fields, and then those people could be named when you get close to the actual time. But it's a good conversation to have early and then probably often, just so that as chairs change over and
Yeah.
the composition of the department changes. But yeah, it's certainly not too soon to read the timing and figure out how many people your department policy says are needed, and then start building a plan from there. And those are not usually difficult conversations. Most of the time, a chair is happy to say, yeah, we only have 2 people, this isn't gonna work, let's put a plan in place. And so that's not a negotiation, mediation kind of conversation, that's just the planning for the future. And our office can just say, that's unusual, but we don't tell units what to do. Usually we follow the criteria and it fits right in.
May I ask one more question associated with it? Because it's also related to what we just talked about expectations and figuring out the policy and guideline early on. So I think they all speak to one another. You need a consult people on the expectations to set your goals. But at the same time, you don't know who those people are gonna be that's gonna set the criterion for you. For example, the quantity and amount of stock, for example. And
Right.
so it would be helpful to very early on know who you would be your targeted people in that committee and have an early conversation on what the expectations may be. Otherwise, it would seem like you're relying on maybe one person in the department to tell you exactly what the expectation is.
I think it's really dangerous to think of that on a local level.
Okay.
Your evaluators, first and foremost, are the people in your field. Because if the letters go out and those people say, these are the important journals, this is good scholarship, your department has that evidence. So I personally wouldn't hang my hat on an internal person in favor of the external field. I would say, our next workshop's on mentoring, but it might actually be on sort of setting these people benchmarks as well, right? And I think if your field recognizes your work, you're in a way better position than having sort of an interpersonal agreement on you said 7 articles, not 8. Because people change and people take new jobs, and you know, you don't want someone to say, you just need 8 articles. Because maybe with 7, you've hit the very best journals in your field and you're there already. And so you might get something too specific and not at all helpful, and then find yourself stuck. So I would say look outside your unit, outside this campus, and you'll be in way better shape when it comes to explaining what field you work in and how the work is evaluated there. And then if the people in that field say this is great work, then your job is done. Everyone else will just say, wow. Thank you all for coming. I know this was squeezing. We have our next date chosen, and it is, I believe, November 3rd. It's Friday again, but it's half an hour off from this, I think. Noon to 1, I think we agreed. And then we will get all of those scheduled and get them up, and I hope you all can attend. Sometimes it's fine. one-on-one conversations that you wanna have, please don't hesitate to let me know, and we can talk about how all of this blanket stuff fits with your life and your. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. So I gave myself another note to try to facilitate that. Just,
But we did that, we met earlier.
we just get you all
Right.
contact with an email.
Yeah.
That, and
I
then
think
probably
it was
the
one-
word from there, like, oh, I also thought this person was that person.